Today I'm going to change the Teflon tape, this little strip here, on my jaw sealer. I'll show you how you do it. You need a replacement strip. They either come pre-cut or they come on a roll. And you need a screwdriver. Doesn't have to be an electric screwdriver, I'm just lazy. So, standard jaw sealer. Yours may or may not have a cutting strip on it. So mine has a blade which cuts the plastic off. But very simply, there's a hot wire underneath this, or a piece of metal which heats up, called the hot wire. It runs a current through it from the transformer. It resists the current, causing it to heat up. You push your plastic in here, push it down. When it clicks, it heats up. If it's switched on, it would click again when it's done. You lift it up and it starts to cool. Every time it heats up and cools down, it burns a tiny bit on Teflon tape. So much you don't notice it. But over time, or if you get an error, then it starts to burn through the tape. So eventually it'll burn through. In my case, there was a bit of an error because at this end, if I tip it over, my rubber strip here on the inside, if I can show you that, my rubber strip has actually slid down the ways. It has moved down in its track. So every time I pressed it down, I was pushing metal onto the end here, causing it to heat up even further. So you'll see a little burn mark there. It doesn't do any damage to the machine, but it starts to melt any plastic you put there much faster than anywhere else. Also, if you touch it when you've just finished sealing it, touch this bit, it's hot, it'll sting a bit. Touch that bit, and it will burn the hand off you. I found that out the hard way. Also, this was a fairly new machine, so I didn't take it apart when I got it, and it came with this blue material. You'll see some of it starting to strip off there. You can see it wrinkled there. This is actually a cover for the film, so I left it, or a film cover for the metal. If I peel that up, you can see that really should have come off when I got it, but there might be some of it trapped under the screws, so that's why I was reluctant to take it off. There's definitely some under here, and it's underneath the strip, so we're going to remove that as well. It's not really an issue because your food is already in a bag and it comes in here, gets sealed. But if you're at the stage where you're doing HACCP, HACCP, Hazard Analysis Critical Control Points, that's a risk. Because you can see here, if I hold this up, it starts to shred a little bit, little tiny fragments of it. Again, it's highly unlikely that it can get inside the bag, and it's not going to combine with the food because it's out here, but it does happen, and it does shred, but it's a risk. It's just something, any kind of debris, any kind of loose material around your product is a risk, and you have to have a control point for it. You've got to work out when or if and how risky it is that's going to get into your food packaging. Whether it does any harm or not is not the question. The question is, can it get into the food? Will it combine with the food? Will it put people off eating your food if they're finding little bits of blue plastic in there? So the other thing you'll see happen is over time, the plastic, if you've got a cutting strip, the bits of plastic that are in there and this machine running up and down leaves tiny bits of metal fragments off the blade, just as it's getting worn over the years, and you'll end up with this fine dust. It needs cleaned because as you run it up and down, you end up with this effect. It gets just dirt. So it needs cleaned so that when you're handling your food and putting it in the bag and then sealing it, you're not handling it with dirty fingers. So first thing we're going to do, straightforward, open that up as wide as it'll go, and in this case I'll take off the cutting strip. They are different size screws to the metal plates that hold the tape in place, so I'm just going to keep those together. There we go. Okay, so there's our two plates. You can see all the debris and bits that get trapped and caught down in there over time. So again, the risk of that getting into your food is pretty much zero, but the fact that it's there at all means you have a cleaning point on your HACCP. So one of your critical control points is making sure that it gets cleaned. So there we go. When I take that little screw out, there's a tiny bit of blue plastic left attached to it, if you can see that. But point is, removing it with the screws off, removing the film with the screws off, does away with that risk. Now, most of these machines that I've seen come from sellers on eBay, Amazon, a couple of packaging places do them. So they're typically non-brand. They all seem to be made in China or India. So that means replacement parts are unavailable for any official replacement parts. You can't look up the brand and go and find the parts for it to get tape or get strips for them. Now, this machine I think was about £30, maybe as much as 50, but there's no parts listed for it. I can't go and search for this brand or this model number. I have searched for the model number and it brought up a whole pile of brands, all with exactly the same product, just a different price. Some of them have plastic housings, some of them, like this one, is metal housing. So we'll give this a clean, and before we put it back on again, that's the film stripped off it. Now here we've got our Teflon tape. You don't need to open this up. If I peel this up here, there we go. There we go. So there's our tape on the top and our tape underneath. So you can open this up, but you don't need to. These are usually the locking screws for our hot wire. So there's one on each end. So you can open this up and lift them out, but we don't need to. What we need is a length of tape. Now, I say my tape machine didn't come with spare strips, but I have a roll of Teflon tape. I'll put a link to this. I got this on Amazon. You will find different thicknesses of Teflon tape. So you might need to adjust your heating time when it comes to reheating your machine. If this one's a bit thicker, it will take a couple of milliseconds longer to heat up. Now, their strips have got nice tapered ends on them. If you can see that, it's got little strips off the end. It makes them very tidy. I don't know if we actually need that or not. We can trim it afterwards, but all we're looking to do is get our tape the right length, so we're not left with a load of it hanging off. But the key thing is, as long as that metal's covered, basically remember the metal burns anything it touches, so you have to cover it up. Okay, now sticky side down. Teflon, you want the sticky side down so the Teflon coating is touching the metal on the underside. So this is fiddly with this. Now, theirs aren't sticky, so it's easier to pull theirs in and out, but with tape it's a bit fiddlier. Let's see if we can get that in there. Nope. Can I do this without sticking the tape to everything? There we go. It's not pretty, but it's in. Okay, so let's lift that up a little bit. There we go. Pull it back again. Torture. These are where the strips are handy, but they are more expensive and you got to get the right size ones. Tape comes in a big roll, and I have a couple of these machines, so having just a roll of tape is much easier. Can't fault the adhesion on the tape, it's strong stuff. There we go. Sorry, blocking the camera when I'm trying to do this, but just trying to pull that flat. There we go. So, it's not difficult, it's just a faff. Okay, so there's our tape run end to end. Good. Okay, so that gives us our Teflon tape on the underside. Now, if I show you both those, you'll see it was burning through equally on both sides. So that's why we've got to have tape top and bottom. I did ask an electrical engineer about this recently. If you have a metal body and this is running across the top, surely this is electrified. It is, but it gets a lot more, it gets a lot hotter than it does. Let's go with electric-y. Basically the current on it is about 2 to 3 volts. so it's such a low current, you'll get a bigger jolt off a AA battery than you will off these. So it'll burn you before it electrocutes you, basically. Now we've got our tape, same again. For the top side. And we literally just stick that over the top. Make sure your wire is fully covered and just press your tip down so that it's nice and flat. And that's you. 2 layers of Teflon. There we go. Doesn't get in the way of unit closing, so there's no issues with the tape on the end. Now, I did mention earlier that my rubber strip on this side has moved, so just need to adjust that in the track, which is tricky. Frankly. This is going to take some faffing about with. Basically, what I'm trying to do is push this rubber strip all the way back up to the end here. So it's just in a groove. It's not glued in or anything. It's just very, very sticky and rubbery. So trying to get it to move is tricky. So I shall faff about with this for a minute or two and come back to you. Okay, got the rubber strip back in place, full length of the metal. So sponging nicely onto the end here. You'll also notice I've given this a wash. I have an antibacterial wipe here as well. Just to make sure there's nothing left, no bits of debris or nasty. So I only pack biscuits. If you're packing tray bakes with chocolate and cream and something else, you're going to have a much more rigorous cleaning process to be assured of. But with fresh product, but with biscuits, they're pretty low risk. So that's it. We have to reassemble it. Metal strips, place them back on and screw them in place, and then we'll put our cutter back on. So I'll get my list of screws here. We'll put it back together. Okay, got our metal plates, our screws, machine's all clean, plates are all been cleaned, cutter has been cleaned, and the table all cleaned down. So we've got a clean work area. These are slightly chamfered, slightly curved at the top. Basically the curve follows the unit, goes up and over. So just line up the holes. Put the plates either side on first. This. And then our cutting plate, if you have one, gets mounted on the front. And that's us, ready to go. Perfect. Fresh new tape, cleaned machine. Don't forget to do a couple of practices, tests with your plastic and see where you need to set your dial to adjust for the thicknesses of your new tape. And that should be you ready to go.